CD5, we have discovered some additional voter suppression attempts by his opponent, Lance Gooden. It turns out that State Representative Lance Gooden filed suit and wanted to claim voter fraud, but he then asked the court to seal the court documents. We wondered what he was hiding. Well, Dan Wood, on behalf of the voters of Texas, filed suit. The court and the Texas Attorney General agreed that the court proceedings should be opened. And he's going to give in more detail what those court proceedings had in them when they were unsealed. But the bottom line is, it was proof that Lance Gooden had done his very best to suppress votes of minorities in Kaufman, Texas. I give you our Democratic candidate for Congress, Dan Wood, who will go into further detail.
Yesterday, I was able to receive documents from a file which had been sealed by Lance Gooden when he filed suit against the Kaufman County Republican Party. The suit was filed back in May of this year, and I had attempted to discover the contents of that file on October the 12th and was told the file had been sealed at that time. I was somewhat surprised that it was sealed, but I went to the judge and asked for permission to see the file, but was told I would need to seek a hearing. So the next Monday, I approached the district clerk personally and asked to see the file, but was again told that I could not see any of the contents of the file. On October the 17th, I filed a motion to unseal the file in the suit of Gooden versus Kaufman County Republicans. What I have found since I received the contents of that file yesterday afternoon at 2 o'clock is shocking. It shows that voter suppression is alive and ongoing in Kaufman County. When Lance Gooden had an opponent in the May Republican runoff election, he filed suit a few days prior to that runoff election, alleging that there were illegally obtained ballots which had been harvested by volunteers from minorities and elderly people, and that they had been improperly obtained. Although there was never a hearing in this suit filed by Mr. Gooden, the judge entered an order which is called a temporary restraining order, which prohibited those applications and those ballots from being counted in the election. Mr. Gooden was able to keep out the vote of several people in Kaufman County. Because of the court order itself. Those applications for mail-in ballot, as well as the ballots themselves, were rejected and not included in the total vote count. I believed from the news media reports at the time that that suit had concluded. I began to believe that something was up, however, when I was not able to look at the file. And then I discovered that suit had never been concluded and that it is today still a pending lawsuit. After the after the May 22nd Republican primary runoff, on June the 6th, Mr. Gooden filed another application for TRO, temporary restraining order, to further restrict the ability of voters in Kaufman County to cast their ballots by mail. I was puzzled as to why Mr. Gooden would even file such an application, given that he had already won the runoff election. It became clear as we looked at the contents of the file yesterday afternoon what had happened. That June 6th TRO application was to continue to suppress the voters' ability to cast their write-in ballots through November, which was the most shocking aspect of what we discovered in that file. I was not given notice as a candidate for Congress in District 5 to appear in the lawsuit. No one else outside of Mr. Gooden and the original defendants outside Mr. Gooden and the original defendants of the lawsuit filed in May were given notice that based on new grounds, a new TRO was being issued by the court. At the same time, Mr. Gooden asked that the file be sealed. We have obtained an email from Mr. Gooden's attorney at the time which gives background to the reason for sealing the file. The attorney stated in her email that we do not want the media to find out. Well, we have now exposed what Mr. Gooden has been trying to do in Kaufman County. The effect is that there are voters in Kaufman County, minorities and elderly, who are now intimidated and cannot and will not vote. Our canvassers for the Kaufman County Democratic Party have identified actual voters who will not canvassers for the Kaufman County Democratic Party have actually identified voters who will not vote because of the intimidation that they felt from the original suit. These are voters who were subpoenaed by officers to come to court and expose themselves as to what and how they voted in the primaries. These people will not vote in person. They will not, and certainly cannot, because of Lance Gooden's lawsuit, vote by mail. The message is clear. If you are African American and elderly in Kaufman County, you better not be trying to vote, because Mr. Gooden has decided who he wants to vote. Mr. Gooden has decided who he wants to vote against the wishes of those very voters. I anticipate there will be further litigation in regard to exposing the voter intimidation in Kaufman County, and we will also be asking the court to set aside its temporary restraining order so that we can encourage all voters in Kaufman County to exercise their right to vote. I'll be happy to take any questions.
How exactly was it that they were approaching being intimidated? What exactly did they identify these individuals? How did this happen?
In some fashion that we do not yet understand, there were voters identified in Kaufman County who were casting mail-in ballots, who had requested applications for mail-in ballots. Somehow Mr. Gooden's attorney obtained those names and named those persons as witnesses in his suit for temporary restraining order. Those voters were subpoenaed and required to testify. These are elderly people who I can tell you certain ones identified. We do not yet know why certain people were identified as to this taking these people to court to have to talk about how they voted. We don't know yet how they got those particular names, but somehow between the county elections administrator, the ballot board, and others, these particular voters were singled out to bring before the court.
Are they all African American?
They are not. One that we know of is Caucasian.
How many?
I estimate there are more than a dozen, maybe as many as 20, and that we have identified, which will not now vote because of this intimidation.
This was reported back in April, a case where a judge ruled that there was voter fraud. This stems from that, and so if these lawsuits were a continuation of a question into this case where voter fraud was determined, then what have you uncovered that we didn't already know?
The suit I think you're referring to is a suit to nullify an election between two judicial candidates in Kaufman County. The judge in that case ordered a new election, as you may know, because of some testimony that these voters had to give when they appeared in court. The court did not find voter fraud. The court, in fact, found that some mail-in ballots that had been mailed had not been properly signed by the volunteer helping to mail the ballot. This was not a voter fraud issue. This was certainly not the voters' fault. Because of no fault of their own, they were not allowed to cast a ballot. For whatever reason, we do not yet understand, the losing candidate in that race decided not to appeal the decision. But Mr. Gooden filed a separate lawsuit from that original suit. And so that there is some mystery there. I still don't understand why Mr. Gooden actually filed this second suit. But what he did was to include by his June 6th application was to make sure that these voters could also not be allowed to vote by mail in the November general election, and now they are intimidated to even vote in person in that election.
Typically, when there is an issue with voter fraud, it's somebody else that may have signed the ballot or actually filled out the ballot, and then it's mail-in ballots. And what you're saying is that that is not what was found in this case.
That's correct. That was not found.
It was just that they called these people in and believed it was just intimidation.
We're claiming that Mr. Gooden in his second lawsuit is pure voter intimidation, yes.
Why, this is all a campaign. Why do you think you're the better candidate in this race?
Well, I'm the better candidate in this race because I live and breathe the 5th District. I live on the farm there in Kaufman County, always been a resident of the 5th District. I believe that we need to have representation for the people of the district and not for people on Wall Street. But I believe that we need a representative of the constituents in the 5th District. I believe our prior or our current congressman represented the interest of people outside the district, especially on Wall Street, banks, and the wealthy.
And this candidate is running against you, the Republican candidate. Why is he not the better candidate?
The candidate running now has served as state representative, and during his time he has shown the ability to work for special interests. He will accept campaign donations and other donations to work for individuals as a sitting representative. For example, he turned a 1,000-acre ranch in Henderson County into a municipal utility district just for the benefit of the owner of that ranch, so that the city of Dallas couldn't dig or put a pipeline across that ranch, because one government agency cannot condemn property of another government agency. There was no other reason for Lance Gooden to pass a bill that created that municipal utility district. There are other examples that we can go into. Mr. Gooden tried to privatize the Terrell State Hospital in 2014 when he was a sitting state representative, and he guided around the president of that company, Correct Care, in the attempt to get the state to allow privatization. Eventually that was turned aside because the bidding rules were not followed as required. But also it's important to point out that Senator Uristi of San Antonio in 2014 was still taking bribes from Correct Care, who is the same company that Lance Gooden was working for to privatize Terrell State Hospital.
You and he, have they crossed paths over the years, Lance Gooden, and you were a city council member of Terrell at one time, and he's been the state representative there for a little while. Crossed paths from time to time. Weren't you all of that represented the same area?
We do. Lance Gooden is a Terrell resident like I am, and so I've known Lance for a long time, and he knows me. But Mr. Gooden and I don't normally cross paths on a regular basis. We wouldn't be really acquaintances.
But do you think he did a good job representing?
I believe that he did not. I believe that he was interested in things like defunding public schools. I think he is not there for the constituents of his district. So that would be my opinion, that he would not be the best candidate for this district.
Is that why you decided to run?
Well, I did decide to run because Mr. Henserling had not had an opponent in recent years. And I, along with many others in this country, determined that we were not going to allow these seats to go unchallenged. And so we decided to step up. Even knowing Mr. Henserling had a giant war chest, we were not going to just allow people to walk back into Congress unopposed.
Just a quick question. So this suit that you unsealed, so it's three pages, right? And the list of voters is redacted. That's the entirety of what you report is unsealed, the 3 pages?
No, there are 52 pages that have been tagged.
Some of those to the press?
Yes, we have those available for the press.
And so, and how do you know that this is that in those 52 pages?
The evidence of voter intimidation is because of the canvassers for the Kaufman County Democratic Party, who go door to door, of course, trying to get the vote out. In their canvassing, they met with voters who told them of the experience they had with the court system because of Mr. Gooden's lawsuit and Mrs. Booker's lawsuit, the first one, and indicated that they were not, in fact, going to cast a ballot at all.
But all the people would be in this list, but it's redacted, right? I mean, these are names of people. So, I mean, there's a certain number here we just don't know because it's redacted.
Correct.
You said 15, 20. I mean, we can't tell what the font size is, and we don't know. You don't really know from the court documents what their race is.
From the court documents itself, we cannot say who the voters were. We have knowledge who those voters were from our personal canvassing that has been done.
Is there still an investigation going on into these ballots from the Attorney General?
There is not.
There's not. On to talk about that they're talking with the Attorney General's office, and there's concern that somebody find out through media reports that there's an investigation. So, you know, I mean, it would seem that that's why they would want it to be sealed.
That reasoning was debunked at the hearing on the motion to unseal, which was held, I believe, on Friday of last week. The attorney for Mr. Gooden contacted the Attorney General's office in court while the judge was on the bench and received the information that the AG said that this should not have been sealed, and they are not pursuing.
Okay.
One last thing, if I might, about this election, you know, from the big picture of it, this district is very Republican. It would take an amazing Democratic wave for you to win this, because as you've seen in the past, this one won easily with very strong turnout. So what are you hoping is going to happen?
Well, Mr. Hensling hadn't had any opposition in a while, so of course he's going to win. We learned that there are Democrats all over this district who have been waiting for a candidate to step forward. And it is not that difficult to win in this district. The part of Dallas County that's within this district has a huge get out the vote program going on throughout the community. And we have long said that if we could get better than average turnout in a midterm, we can take this race. This is a race that could have been won with just a little effort on the part of others who could be interested in this race. Unfortunately, when I first began, it was more of a battle just to get attention. But we have that attention now. We have the attention of everyone in the Dallas area and the Texas Democratic Party, and we can win this race with the large turnout.
With this being the news media doing their job, if you could summarize in 30 seconds the most important aspects of what they can take away from this press conference, what would you say?
Well, the chilling effect on the minority voters and elderly in Kaufman County is alive and ongoing, and that's unfortunate. To disenfranchise anyone is something that needs to be fought at every turn, and I intend to do that, and I expect there will be further litigation in that effort.